morning. This is the Blaine's World webcast that can be found each week on Facebook, YouTube, and LinkedIn. You can also find us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts. You get more information about previous shows and future shows at our website, which is behind me, blainesworld.net. I'm your host, Blaine Greenfield, and I'm here in my Zoom studio in lovely downtown Fairview, North Carolina. Each week, we focus on positive news and information that people and organizations in both Western North Carolina and throughout the country. And toward that end, it's my pleasure to introduce Dr. Melinda Toney, founder, owner of Awaken Chrysalis, for being my guest today. Dr. Toney, you can wave to all your fans and friends who are watching this. Great. So that is Dr. Toney. I should mention that Dr. Melinda Toney is an integrative physician who studied various paradigms and modalities of healing to get all at the root of issues. Her passion is connecting people with their breath, specifically using the system of transformational breath. Dr. Toney finds the breath system is the most elegantly powerful, efficient, and unifying doorway to healing. And let me ask you first, Dr. Toney, because it's the first time you and I have met on the air. As a child, you grew up where?
I was born in the States, but I grew up in the Philippines. I was in the Philippines from age 2 to 14. Then we returned to the States.
And so when you were growing up in the Philippines, did you always know you wanted to be a doctor?
Not at all. Had no idea. Didn't know until my first year in college when my chemistry professor beckoned me and suggested it.
What, to become a doctor?
To become a doctor.
Yes, it's just a question. Is the chemistry professor still around?
No, he's not. I often wonder. I really should look him up.
Yeah, yes, because one of the, I encourage you, because in another life I was a college professor, and one of the great things you can do is to tell them that made a difference in your life. So this chemistry teacher got you into becoming interested in medicine. What was the teacher's name? Do you remember?
Jim James. Jim James, Dr. James.
Let's look him up, though.
In Georgia, well, that I did a year in Wesleyan College in Macon, Georgia, and he was my professor. I will look him up. Good idea.
And we'll send them a copy of the clip. Dr. James, we recognized you. So that was in your freshman year?
Yes, it was. I entered college early. I skipped the year of high school, so I was about turning 17.
Okay, at that point in time, then you just knew you wanted to be a doctor?
No, as soon as I heard that, I was in Macon, Georgia. The only way I knew to figure that out was to get on a Greyhound bus headed for New York City. And I headed for New York City, and I walked the streets of New York City, did not enter one hospital, one university, just looked at the people, because I thought that New York was the microcosm of the macrocosm, so that if I saw New York, I would naturally have a sense of humanity. And so when I came back on the Greyhound bus back to Macon, Georgia, I just had this feeling that, yes, I'm going to be a doctor.
And that's pretty cool. You were just by yourself then at 17 or 18?
Well, I had cousins who lived there. I spent the nights with them, but through the days, I just walked the streets.
And so then you, undergraduate, your major was in science or chemistry?
It was in biology. I went on to finish my pre-med at Emory University in Atlanta and went on to finish my medical degree there.
And then as we introduced it, so you're especially, I guess, you're considered an integrative physician. Explain for the people who hear that term a lot, but what exactly is an integrative physician?
Well, actually, I did my 3-year residency in family medicine. I was a family doctor. And as an eager family doctor who wanted to really empower her patients, I found that after several years that I had to go beyond what I was taught in conventional medicine. And so I went on to learn other modalities of healing. What was most important to me at the time, and still is number one, do no harm.
Okay.
Number two, engage with the big picture rather than the small picture. And number 3, to have a deep understanding of what sustains life and what creates disease, and a very deep reverence for life and my patients. So this happened when I was in solo private practice, and it was always holistic in Pennsylvania, where I practiced for 30 years. And believe me, in the 80s, the word holistic was a
Sure.
dirty word in Pennsylvania. And finally, the world caught up with me and colleagues who I didn't even know about. And finally, this idea of integrative medicine, which is starting from conventional medicine, engaging and empowering the patient, bringing in various modalities, both in conventional medicine, but also in natural ways, bringing about the activating the healing force or the life force within each individual. And by doing this, choosing very carefully the appropriate tools, be it medicine, surgery, herbs, homeopathy, and I happen to also practice homeopathy. I create custom-made remedies for people. So this is truly an integrative way. All of this is in service of the person we are helping or we are serving.
Now, when you were in Pennsylvania, where in Pennsylvania were you located?
Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, the Lehigh Valley.
Okay. Yeah, I worked and lived in Bucks County, not too far away.
Oh, wow.
And
Yes.
so you were in Pennsylvania there. Now, are you in Asheville area now?
After almost 30 years of practice in Pennsylvania, I decided that it was time to take care of myself, to learn how to take care of myself. And so I moved here in 2015.
Okay. And when you moved here, did you resume your practice in this area?
In a different way. In Pennsylvania, I worked with as many as 6 colleagues, psychotherapist, acupuncturist, nutritionist, etc. But when I came to Asheville, I decided that I would really focus on what I love to do, which is Chrysalis, which is all about empowering what is emerging in the person, which is often triggered by an illness. So here in Pennsylvania, here in Asheville, I really zero in on the modalities that I love. I am no longer a part of the system, although I can still write prescriptions and order tests. But I really work with these many different modalities and paradigms of healing.
Then you started, it's a cool name, and I'll ask you to talk a little bit about it. So then you started in Asheville area. You started, the name of the company is now Awaken Chrysalis.
Yes.
And what's the significance of that name?
Chrysalis is that process between the cocoon that emerges into a butterfly. And to awaken it is my goal, to facilitate this emergence of what is begging to emerge from usually an illness or a discomfort or a life situation that brings people to me. And so I look at their medical history and also ask them a lot of questions about their family history, but also how their issue started, just listening to their story. And I found that with deep listening, we often can find the root of the issue. And what I have found in my studies is that the root of most issues are really on the emotional, mental, and energetic levels of the human being. And when we engage with this energetic level, that actually informs the body's functions.
Well, let me
And
ask you then to give an example of that then, because again, this kind of tradition you use in traditional medicine and a whole bunch of other things as well. So if somebody would come to you, give me an example, if you would, of somebody who would come to you with kind of a problem they may have that wasn't being solved other typical ways.
first and foremost, I am there for the patient, or the client. I am not attached to any one modality. And I would listen to this person's story, and look at their labs, look at their history. And then, depending on what I see, I may suggest a diet. I may suggest new lifestyle, some lifestyle changes, sleep, exercise, etc. But what I find most exciting is that often the problem is preceded by a traumatic event that doesn't sit well with a person. And so I love just working my way in with the tools of homeopathy and transformational breath and other energy healing modalities, and work to shift what has gone awry. And so it is a process. It's not a once and done thing usually. It is a process, just as the cocoon takes a while to become a butterfly.
And talk if you would about the process, because what I'm hearing you say is kind of a little bit different than people typically go to a doctor. You know, they go to a doctor for a 5-minute appointment or 10-minute appointment and then get some medicine. And that supposedly is going to cure the person of everything, but it doesn't often happen. It's not often the case. So when they work with you, it seems it's more than just a 5-minute visit, initial visit.
Sure.
It's a
Yes.
process. You mentioned transformational breathing. What is that?
Transformational breath is a system that uses the breath, and it engages with the physical, the mental, the emotional, and the spiritual levels. It was founded by a woman named Judith Kravitz, Dr. Judith Kravitz, who is mother of 8 biological children. And almost 50 years ago, she noticed these lumps in her neck, and she was very determined to treat this naturally. It turned out to be throat cancer, she believes. And this is what gave her the impetus to develop this transformational breath. Almost 50 years later, she is vibrant, and it is now in 54 countries, largely in Europe, in Turkey, and also in the Gulf states, in addition to, of course, the US.
Explain what it is, though. I don't quite understand it.
So it is we teach people a technique of breathing using the diaphragm, and connected with a connected breath and a relaxed exhale. So people lay on a mat for about 45 minutes to an hour, breathing in this way. And transformational breath was the first breath school. You know, there are like 100 breath schools out there, and quickly increasing. Of course, breath has been around for quite a while, for millennia, right? But this is the first breath school that started doing hands-on. In other words, the facilitator touches different parts of the body, like different points that hold the energy or the charge of emotions and stories, you know, that were created by our subconscious in these various parts in our bodies that become issues in our tissues. And we invite the breath in those places, and And then we use tone, we use sound and movement to help shift, loosen up, and transform, transmute this old traumas. Or also, of course, our body also holds a lot of joy in different places. So when we bring the breath in this way, it actually is transformative.
What's interesting about this approach is that as I'm listening to you, that it's not something I ever learned in school. Nobody ever taught me this,
Neither did I, believe me.
Well, no, but it's when you think about it, it's kind of interesting. We learn lots of stuff, but we
Yes.
never, breathing is so crucial to our lives, but nobody ever taught me this.
Yes.
How, in terms of people that work with you, they learn it, but how are people supposed to learn this? Or just through doctors such as yourself, or
No, not at all. We have thousands of transformational breath facilitators worldwide. In fact, I was so captivated by my first experience of transformational breath in 2019. I knew I wanted to learn this, and I flew all the way to China to meet Judith Kravitz, because that was the next place I could meet her. She used to be a globetrotter. And I breathed among my Chinese colleagues, and it really was amazing.
And so that's interesting. So you only started this since 2019,
Yes.
but how has it impacted both your life and your practice? Talk about that.
Oh, wow. Well, first of all, the breath is, as you said, is the only thing that it really is the only thing that is essential for life.
Right.
We can do without water, we can do without food, we can do without light, and we could even do without each other for days on end, weeks on end, and still be living. But without breath, we're on the other side after a few minutes. So you can imagine, and also many spiritual texts cite the breath as something very special. Some texts cite it as something that is of the spiritual realm of experience. And so you can imagine that consciously breathing in a certain way and being conscious of my breath throughout the day has drastically changed my life.
So
And I'd love to tell you stories also of friends.
Well, you're ahead of me, because I was going to ask you that. So most people would agree with you that it's very important to our life, but give me an example, if you would, please, or a story of somebody whose life was changed by this.
Yes, yes. At my first seminar, 5-day seminar in 2019, I was blown away by what I saw. And the most outstanding person who I met was this woman named Carrie. And Carrie described herself as an army brat who grew up in a tumultuous household. There was a lot of violence, and the dynamic between mother and father was just very unhealthy. So at 14, she ran away from home. She hid from her parents. But one night, she had a dream. And the dream was very disturbing, because in the dream, her father killed her mother. So Carrie really felt the need to return home to try to talk her mother into leaving her father. And of course, unfortunately, that didn't happen. And in 4 days, her father murdered her mother. And Carrie had to testify against her father in court. And you can imagine that this caused a very thick armor around her of bitterness towards what happened. It seemed impenetrable until she went to a retreat place in Costa Rica, where she experienced transformational breath. That and ayahuasca, she believed, which they were offering at this place, was what was needed to make a crack in this very hard shell. But it opened up, and when she came home, she was very committed to practicing transformational breath at least twice a day. And every time she felt out of sorts or out of balance, she would ground herself back into the breath. So I met Carrie when she was a transformational breath facilitator intern. And I was just very impressed that she said the practice of breath helped her forgive her father. Yes. And she said, when she said, and he's coming out of prison in 3 years, my chest just tightened up. And I said, aren't you scared? And she said, no, you don't understand. I forgave my father a long time ago. And when I did, I connected with him and sent him the book on the Course of Miracles. And we've been in touch ever since. I am excited to welcome my father back home. This blew me away. I couldn't understand it, but it fueled me to then go to China 2 months later. And the other day, I reconnected with Carrie. And she, of course, remembered me. And she said, you know about my father? He was released from prison last July. And I was there. And we've had an amazing, an incredible relationship.
But
Now, what?
all as a result of this transformational breath?
Yes, yes.
Well, talk to me about the process then. So if somebody's listening to this, who should be the student of transformational breath, or who should find out more about this? Is this for everybody, or are there any specific people this would be best for?
First of all, it would be helpful to have somebody who's open to their healing. Some people come to us desperate for their healing, but somebody who is curious and wants to learn a tool that they can use on their own. In other words, to empower what they already have, to empower themselves with what they already have, and to become more conscious about this. It is not too helpful for people with psychosis or schizophrenia, but is very helpful with depression and anxiety. It is also very helpful with blood pressure issues. By the way, I have found that my blood pressure, which is just a little elevated, not taking any meds, but I have definitely seen a correlation between my transformational breath practices and bringing down my blood pressure. It's been helpful with infertility. In fact, may I tell you another story, just brief?
Sure.
Yes. At the last training that I went to in New York in March, I met 2 women who didn't know each other, but they had these big grins on their faces, and they were proudly put their hands on their bumps, and they claimed that these were transformational breath babies. Both women tried to conceive for 3 years. And finally, after their first seminar, voila, little Johnny was conceived, and I don't know the name of the other baby. But when Judith Kravitz has a big smile when she says, you know, there are a lot of breath babies running around all around the world. And I would say that Judith would know. She has.
Well, let me ask you this, in terms of if somebody's listening to this and is kind of interested in transformational breath, how do they go about learning it? In other words, let's say they're in Asheville or anywhere, in fact, how do you get more information?
Yes, I think it's first important to experience it. And I offer 2-hour workshops of small groups with 4 people, no more than 4 people, because it does require a lot of attention from the facilitator. And many people, if not most people, really see a huge difference after even just the first experience. And then if one would like to experience it more and even learn how to facilitate themselves, then they can attend a 5-day seminar, which I can talk up to you more about, but we are having this in Asheville in May.
Well, let's jump right into that since you mentioned it. So if people are interested in finding out more about this, best bet is to go, do you have a website or
Yes.
other place to
Go-
get information on?
They can go to my website at awakenchrysalis.com, or they can email me at info@awakenchrysalis.com, or call me at 828-552-4276. And I am very pleased to be offering workshops, 2-hour workshops at CCLD, which is the Center for Conscious Living and Dying in Swannanoa. I'm going to offer those on the 29th of this month, and then the 6th of March, I'm sorry, of May. And then the big offering where one would learn how to self-facilitate, and it is the 5-day seminar, May 11th to 15th. It will be led by Eugenia Altamira, my favorite mentor, who is the senior, she is a senior international trainer, as well as the coordinator for education of transformational breath. And it's going to be for 5 days. One will have access to at least 10 breathing sessions over those 5 days. And there will be sound, toning, movement exercises, forgiveness exercises, dyads, and many, many more. It is very powerful.
What's interesting about what I hear you saying is the fact then that people can sign up for these sessions or attend them, but you don't have to be a doctor at this point in time. Is that correct?
No, don't have to be a doctor.
Okay, so it's just
Maybe for the better. However, there are several doctors around the world that have been transformed by transformational breath. And actually, I would like to tell you another story about a colleague, very special colleague.
please.
Is that okay?
Yeah.
Dr. Evan Lee, who is a global he's in global health, and he practices in Geneva, Switzerland. He is a very data-oriented physician, Harvard graduate, and also he got his MBA in MIT, so very data-oriented. He noticed that his blood pressure went skyrocketing during the lockdown, during the pandemic. And he necessitated 4 antihypertensive medications. And even on 4 medications, his blood pressure was way high, way high, and he was in danger of a stroke. He tried mindfulness-based reduction technique, stress reduction technique, 8-week course that didn't really do much to his blood pressure. And finally, in February of 2023, he met transformational breath. And that absolutely opened the gates to healing. Now, he continues with his involvement with expressive arts to heal himself from complex PTSD, which apparently was part of this blood pressure issue, and also is very engaged with healing arts, expressive arts and psychotherapy. Now his blood pressure is well under control, still just on 3 medicines, but at the rate that he's healing, it's very hopeful. And another thing that's really interesting about Dr. Lee is that he's just so impressed that he's gathering physicians in the transformational breath community who have used this method with their patients. One, Dr. Nadia in the Netherlands, has used transformational breath with her cancer patients, and another, Dr. Pippa in the UK, has written a paper on the breath using as her subjects medical students. And so the goal here is for us to collaborate and to create a study that will be published one day. And we hope that this will be our contribution, that the first of possibly many contributions to bring transformational breath to the forefront. I am so very excited about this, to be part of this. And
If folks want to learn more about transformational breath, let's talk about the process. So the one thing you said, they can, first of all, go to your website. I'll mention that again. But they can also, it seems to me that the very first step then should be to sign up for one of these 2-hour courses. Is
that's
that
right.
the best bet?
That is right. And then that may help them decide whether or not they want to come to the 5-day retreat, March 11th to 15th. I must also mention that the Transformational Breath Foundation has a website. It's transformationalbreath.com. And there are many things, a lot of information and resources, including Judith Kravitz offers a monthly free gathering. She calls it a monthly family gathering. It's on Zoom and it's free. And there can be anywhere from 100 to 200 people from around the world breathing together. It's just amazing. So there are really many resources. I'm happy to share more of these resources if somebody reaches out to me.
Well, also, if they want more information, they can go to your website again, we mentioned.
They can.
But let me
Yes,
just have
the
you,
events page.
right, let me just have you clarify something, though. You said that, I think you mentioned March, it's going to be in May, I think, the
Correct.
upcoming
May
event.
11th to 15th. It's Mother's Day week. So it's a wonderful way, whether you're a man or a woman, a wonderful treat for yourself to mother yourself.
Just, I'm curious, in terms of, who do you recommend should be taking this from an age standpoint? Is there any particular beginning or end of this?
Well, anywhere, well, we breathe children.
Sure.
We breathe children, but likely they wouldn't come to the seminar. Anywhere from teens to, I actually have two 80-year-old friends. One of them is a client who intend to come. So it's just, that's one thing beautiful about the breath. It is the unifier. It is the common denominator. It pierces through ages, it pierces through opinions, political, religious, or otherwise, any boundaries, any separation that the human mind can think of. The breath pierces right through all that. It's amazing.
It's also interesting to me, the fact that you talk about the breath, that this is also something that everybody does. I mean, that's a given, we have to breathe. But let me ask you this. Are there ways that people that are doing the breathing wrong, or they should improve it, or?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked that question, because there is more and more awareness of dysfunctional breathing. It's actually a DSM-4 code or whatever. Sorry, I don't I don't keep up with how many DSMs we are in now, which is a list of all the diseases thought up by man or known to man. And what we find is that when we change our breath pattern, when we become aware of our breath pattern, we actually change our life. I know that's a striking comment, but this is what I have experienced myself, because there are constrictions in the body with one experience after another, especially traumatic experiences. And when there are enough constrictions, and all of us have these constrictions, but these constrictions are what determine, these constrictions in our bodies, these issues in our tissues constrict and create this pattern. Each of us has a different breath pattern, but the breath pattern is very telling. So in transformational breath, we can observe the breath, how the breath is welcomed into the body and where it goes and where it doesn't go. And this is a reflection of how we do life. Doesn't that make sense? If the breath is life.
Had you
If the
discovered,
breath,
you
yes.
mentioned that you got into this in 2019. That's when you found it. Would your practice or your teaching, I guess, or your being a doctor have been radically different had you discovered this a bunch of years earlier?
Oh, certainly it has changed it a lot. I think that breath has helped me become much more present to the person that's before me. And it has also cultivated my intuition. It has helped me think more clearly. So you can imagine when your doctor is clearer, more present, and is more relaxed, wouldn't you find this a much more healing experience?
Not only that, I'd find it also amazing that my doctor would spend the time with me in terms of going through this process, as opposed to what we talked about earlier. Most doctors, unfortunately, I guess, just don't have the time or don't make the time to spend with the patient. Because when you're with a patient, it seems you're spending quite a bit of time with that patient, as
Yes,
opposed to traditional medicine.
I've always followed my bliss in my work. And a big part of my bliss is really connecting in a meaningful way. And so even when I was with the system, because I did used to round into hospitals, take call 24/7. But as you know, medicine has changed. And all through that time when I was in private practice, I was really much more dedicated to the people I was serving than I was to a form that I was supposed to follow. And of course, that was not a big moneymaker for me, but it made my heart full. And so this time that I am in Asheville, it's a different chapter where I can choose to do exactly what I love to do and to have a work that is meaningful. So that's just what makes me happy.
And hopefully making a difference, for people as well, which is even more important. Dr. Toney, to recap, a couple of things you said. That number one, if folks want to find out about you and your practice, best bet is you mentioned the website or email address, phone number. Could you repeat those if you would, please?
Yes. First of all, you could probably Google me at Melinda Toney, Toney.
Okay.
And my website is Awaken Chrysalis. And Chrysalis is Chrysalis. My email address is info@awakenchrysalis.com.
Okay. And so the other thing, if you would share about this conference coming up in May, and it's open, by the way, and it's primarily Asheville based, or they'll be from around the country.
Well, there are actually 6 facilitators coming from afar, from New York, from New Jersey, from closer, from Florida, from Georgia, converging here because they're so eager. They're so eager to share what has transformed them. And so we might even have a facilitator all the way from New York, I'm sorry, from the Bay Area. And all the people that are coming as participants thus far are from the furthest is New York. But there are many times when people come internationally.
And are you one of
I went to China for a training.
Are you one of the facilitators as well?
I am one. I'm a group leader, a transformational breath group leader, and I am on the training path. And I will be working alongside my dear mentor, Eugenia Altamira.
And-
She's such a special soul.
And what's the name of this conference?
It is called the Transformational Breath Personal Seminar, 5-day seminar,
Okay.
from
And-
May 11th to 15th.
And to get sign up for that or find out more information about that, is that also your website, or is there another place to find?
It is. Yes, it is.
Well, anyway, I'd like thank you for being my guest, Dr. Toney, for this
I thank you.
Blaine's World webcast. I'd also like to thank my producer, Cappy Tassetti, and
Yes.
hope you have a super conference. Sounds very exciting, and we'll
It's a
keep in touch.
seminar.
Seminar, excuse
Yes.
me, and we'll keep in
Thank you.
touch. Dr.
Thank
Toney,
you so much for what you do, Blaine. Thank
Okay.
you.
you be well. Thank
Appreciate
you.
you.